Margaret Bernice. She was so beautiful, had a lot of dark hair and a good nose. Her skin was very soft, and I loved kissing her face.
Welcome to Still a Part of Us, a podcast where moms and dads share the story of their child who was stillborn or who died in infancy. I'm Winter Red, and on this episode, Emily is telling the story of her daughter, Margaret, who was stillborn at 37 weeks due to unknown reasons. As a word of caution to our listeners, this story contains emotional triggers of stillbirth and infant loss. Please keep yourself emotionally and mentally healthy and seek help if needed. Also, be aware that these birth stories may differ from his or her partners, as these accounts are told from their own perspective through the lens of trauma, heartache, and the passage of time. Please respect our moms and dads who are brave and gracious to share their children with us. Welcome, Emily. Thank you so much for being with me here today on this podcast episode. Tell me a little bit about yourself. What do you do currently? And maybe give us a little bit of context about how long ago Margaret came into your lives.
I'm a teacher. This is my 8th year, and I was teaching in my 7th year. School had just started when I found out that I was pregnant with Margaret. And I was teaching when Margaret was born as well.
How long ago was Margaret born? Can you give us some context in time?
Margaret was born on May 10th, 2019. So it was actually 16 weeks ago today. So 4 months ago.
That was so very recent. Thank you so much for being here to tell us about that. You are a teacher and working full time, I'm assuming.
Yes, I work full time.
And who is in your family at this time?
Just my husband and I, and we have a dog, Remus. He's a lab and a blue heeler mix, and he turned 3 in April.
Oh, fun. Remus, that's good. I like that.
Yeah, after Harry Potter.
Mm-hmm. And what kind of, what do you guys like to do as a family? Or what do you like to do for hobbies and such?
Well, I like reading and walking with my dog or without my dog sometimes. I'm a runner, so I enjoy running. I've had some issues with running this summer, just with it being so hot. I wasn't as into it. And since Margaret was born, I have started writing. So I now enjoy writing letters to her in a journal. And then I also write blog posts about her and about things, posts lost for in a blog that my husband and I created in order to honor Margaret.
Yeah, that's actually how we came upon each other and met each other, is through your blog. So,
Yeah.
and I'm
Yes.
really grateful for that. Tell me a little bit about your pregnancy. That was really not too long ago. How did that look for you? Did you guys have any fertility issues?
No, we did not have any fertility issues, though it did take about 5 cycles, I think, for me to get pregnant. So I was worried that I was going to have fertility issues because I know so many people who were like, oh gosh, we tried once and got pregnant. I wasn't expecting that. So I thought, like, when we tried once, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not pregnant. What's wrong with me? And in reality, like, looking back at that, I'm like, oh, 5 cycles really isn't very long. So no, I had no fertility issues. My pregnancy, yeah, it wasn't that long ago. About this time last year actually was like the cycle I got pregnant on. But my pregnancy was perfect. I was told multiple times at my doctor's appointments that I was the perfect patient. They'd always ask if I was taking my prenatal vitamins. And I'd say yes every morning with my breakfast. And, they'd always say, oh, you're so perfect. You always take your medicine. Every time we went to the doctor until the last time, you could always hear Margaret's heartbeat like right away. And she was always moving, and they always commented on how, well she was doing and how I was gaining like a good amount of weight. and she never had any issues. Pretty much once we got past the first trimester, I wasn't worried about anything wrong or anything, bad happening or anything going wrong. I recently, from listening to other child loss stories or and your podcast, have found out more about the 20-week scan and how that can tell a lot of things about the baby. But when I was pregnant with Margaret, when I went to the 20-week scan, I wasn't even thinking like, oh, they might find something that could be wrong with her. And I guess it was that, like ignorance is bliss type of feeling. I just, once we got past the first 13 weeks, I just never even thought like anything would happen. And there was nothing wrong with her at the 20-week scan, but now I just know that that's something, that a lot of people are fearful of. And so during my pregnancy, I ran. I ran until I was about 33 weeks pregnant. Obviously, I started like slowing down and didn't run as long when I first was found out I was pregnant. I was actually training for my second half marathon, and the weekend I found out I was pregnant, I ran like 7 miles, and then the next couple weekends I never made it to running, so I just kind of gave up on the half marathon and was like, it's fine, I'll just go 3 miles. So by the time I was like, in the third, probably the end of the second trimester and the beginning of the third trimester, I was pretty much like running a mile and then walking, and then as it got later, I was just walking and then maybe running for a couple of minutes. But I enjoyed that, and everyone told me how healthy that was, and how you do that, and that's good for the baby. And I did prenatal yoga from about 13 or 19 weeks to 36 weeks, and I would have kept going. I never really had any morning sickness. I got nauseous a couple times, but I never threw up or anything. I did get some like acne, and I had a weird kind of like red splotchiness on my chest and my back, but they just gave me some cream for that, and it went away eventually. Around 30 weeks, I kind of developed some carpal tunnel in like both of my wrists, but it wasn't horrible, and I got some braces for them and slept with those, and of course I started getting like swollen feet. And I was kind of worried about that. At my 36-week appointment, I had actually asked, do you ever induce people for having really swollen feet? Because my feet and my hands were, just I could tell they were swollen.
Yeah.
Other than that, though, everything was fine. At my 35-week appointment, I actually had like a high blood pressure reading. It was slightly elevated.
Yeah.
And so they told me that, I would just, instead of waiting a week, I'd come back. That was a Friday. So they told me to come back on Tuesday. And so that Friday I had the high blood pressure reading. And then that weekend on Sunday, I actually was like sitting in bed reading, and I kind of saw those like spots you get in front of your space when you like stand up too quickly or move too quickly, but I wasn't moving. And so my husband and I finally decided like, okay, yeah, we should go to the hospital. So I went to the hospital, and everything was checked out. Everything was fine. They took samples of my urine. I didn't have any protein in my urine. My blood pressure wasn't high. She was moving fine. So I went back to the doctor that Tuesday, and my blood pressure wasn't reading elevated or anything. So they just had me go back on Friday, and that was my 36-week appointment. And everything was fine at my 36-week appointment on that Friday. And then on May 9th, my 37-week appointment was when everything wasn't fine anymore.
Was Margaret doing okay on all those at 36 weeks and 35 when you went in for those blood pressure checks?
Yeah, she was doing great. I mean, that's what they said anyway with the, they did her heart rate beat and said that that was good. I didn't have ultrasounds at those. My last ultrasound was at 30 weeks, and she was like 3 pounds something at the 30-week scan, which seems normal from what I've heard from other people. So no, she had no issues.
And were you still seeing the spots, or was it just that one day?
No, it was pretty much just that one day. So that one day when we went to the hospital, and then everything, I didn't really ever see them again. I was still getting some like headaches, but I don't know if that was, related at all. But every time I went back, yeah, my blood pressure was fine. So, or not elevated, I guess. I mean, it was like higher than it obviously usually is because I was pregnant, but it wasn't, past the 140 or whatever they say.
Yeah. So then what happened?
So I had my 37-week appointment on a Thursday so that I could meet, because I was going on Friday because that was my like weekly appointment. But I needed to go on a Thursday to meet one of the doctors I hadn't met yet. I went to a practice that alternated um, between doctors so that you would get to know them for whoever was at the hospital that day or on
Gotcha.
call, however that works. So I was actually at my 36 week and 7-day appointment. So, but I just, it was my 37-week appointment. And that was Thursday, May 9th. And so I had gone to work. I worked a half day. My husband was taking a test that he needed in order to complete his master's degree because he was almost done. So he had taken the whole day. So I went to this appointment alone. He had gone to every other appointment through my pregnancy. Except one before this because my friend Emily was visiting from Michigan and she went with me instead. And so my husband, trying to save his days for when Margaret was born,
Right.
didn't take a day. So I was, in the waiting room and I couldn't really focus. I usually read in the waiting room. So I always carry a book with me. So I usually read whenever I had downtime. And I couldn't focus because I was just, excited and I was ready to hear Margaret's heartbeat. And I was 37 weeks and I thought maybe I was going to have like high blood pressure again because my mom had high blood pressure with me and my sister had high blood pressure with my niece. And, I'd had like the elevated reading before.
Right.
So I was like, oh, maybe I'm going to find out, that they're going to have to induce me because my, blood pressure is high. And I was so excited to meet her. So if they wanted to induce me, I wasn't like, no, you know what I mean? I know a lot of people are like, no, I want my body to do it naturally. But for me, I was like, yes, I want to meet her. I'm like ready to meet her. So I was called back and the nurse took all of my vitals or whatever. And I was talking to the nurse about the night before and how on Wednesday night I had gone for a walk with my husband and our dog, and I had like diarrhea like out of nowhere like twice. Like I was walking and then I was like, I think I'm going to, and before I could even get the words out, had like diarrhea in my shorts. And and my husband was like, do you want me to like go get the car and come back and pick you up? And I was like, no, I don't want to like sit here,
No.
And then we kept walking and it happened again. So I was telling the nurse about how I had diarrhea and how it was, I thought it was funny. And we were joking about how like, random things are in pregnancy and like, how weird your body gets. And she like read my blood pressure and it was elevated again. And so then I went into the doctor's room and the doctor came in. And again, it was the first time that I was meeting her. Because my practice, rotated through them. So before she did the Doppler, we talked about my blood pressure, how it was elevated, and how I probably wasn't going to make it to 40 weeks just because, I had another like high breeding. So we need to just kind of figure out what to do. And then we discussed the diarrhea I had the night before, and she discussed how, I should go get some like Gatorade or Pedialyte and how they'd run some blood work just to, make sure I wasn't having like any sort of, I don't know, I guess infection maybe, or I don't know the reasons why you would get diarrhea. I'm not sure. And so then she went to use the Doppler and it wasn't picking up anything. But, and I guess I kind of thought it was weird because, I could always hear everything, but I mean, she was real quick to like run it around and was just kind of like, And then she said that she actually had dropped that one earlier, so she'd go get another one. I don't know if she really dropped it or if that was like a, thing that they say maybe as like a, oh crap, I need to like, go collect myself for a second and figure out something. I mean, I have no idea. But I still was just thinking like, oh, okay, that makes sense. She dropped it, like, of course you dropped it because my daughter is, fine and her heartbeat has always been here. And so she came back with what she said was another Doppler. I don't really have any idea whether it was. And we still couldn't hear anything. And so I finally said something like, that's really weird because usually I can hear her like right away. And she said, have you felt the baby moving recently? And I said, yes, that I had felt her Wednesday in a meeting. And then I felt her like Wednesday night around dinner. Like I had come home from work on Wednesday, the night that I had diarrhea and didn't feel well. So I had like laid down and then I like um felt kind of like a, I don't know, like jolt, I guess, in my stomach. And I remember texting a friend asking, like, are these like Braxton Hicks? Because everyone had been asking me, are you
Mm-hmm.
having Braxton Hicks contractions? And I had no idea, like, what do those feel like? I've never been pregnant before. I don't know. And my friend was like, oh, yeah, that's, what it feels like. And then I had a bowel movement and I felt a lot better. So I went down to eat dinner and, I had like that jolt. And so I felt like, that was her. And um, because I had diarrhea, I, figured like I probably missed her moving a little bit because, I was so preoccupied with the diarrhea
Yeah.
and the
Yeah.
not feeling well. And that I had felt her in like different positions, and that at my previous appointment, the person had told me that if you felt them in different positions, then that counted as well. And now I think, she probably was like moving in there, but it wasn't her like being alive. It was like her body in the fluid, probably, I guess. I don't know.
Really quickly, I'm going to just ask a quick question, Emily. Were you counting her kicks? Were you counting her movement? Is that something that you were told to do and kind of be aware of?
No, no, I was not counting her kicks because I was not told to do that.
Okay.
The only thing that was ever mentioned was like towards the end, I feel like, like, has she been kicking? And I'd be like, yeah. And then at the last appointment, my 36-week appointment, she had said, like, have you been feeling the baby move a lot? And I said, yeah. And, I feel her in different positions a lot. Does that count? Because I can't remember if I was feeling her move less than usual or not. She usually always like moved at nighttime when we like would go to bed, and she said, like, yeah, if you feel them in different, or, feel her in a different position, that counts. And so I was like, okay, then yeah, I feel her all the time.
Okay. Yeah.
And obviously at the 36-week appointment, she still had a strong heartbeat.
Yeah.
And so I finally had said, like, that's weird because usually I can hear right away. And she just said, yeah, I'm going to go check and see if the ultrasound room is available so we can do an ultrasound to, hear the heartbeat. And I was like, okay. And so she left. And at that time, I was thinking, like, why am I not hearing anything? And I was having, I think, kind of like a mini panic attack with, like, just like trying to breathe and holding my stomach and, saying, like, you have to be okay. Like, please
Yeah.
be okay. I know you're okay. And I still wasn't really thinking that she wasn't going to have a heartbeat. I was thinking, like, yeah, the Dopplers aren't working. I like, this is kind of scary, but she's fine. And so then I she came back and got me and took me to the ultrasound room. And as we were walking down the hallway, she said, did you grab your stuff? And I said, yeah, because obviously we're like leaving the room. And then she said, do you have your phone? And I said yes. And I'm assuming she specifically asked me that because she probably assumed something was wrong. And so I would need to call someone because I was by myself. But at the time, I was just thinking, like, of course I have my phone. I told you I'd grab my stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I guess I feel like I was still just pretty oblivious and like not expecting anything to be wrong. So we went into the ultrasound, and the ultrasound tech had done all my previous exams, the 8 week, the not 20 week, the 30 week. And she, the last time we were there at the 30 week, again, it was like, oh, you're a perfect patient. This is like the perfect pregnancy. You would be someone great to do, test our new like 3D tech machine on. So it was always, like, oh, you're perfect, nothing's wrong. So it was her, and she was moving the wand around on my belly, and I was really unsure of whether I should look at the screen or not. Like, I guess I just didn't know. All the other appointments I had been in there with my husband, and it was like I couldn't wait to look at the screen. But
Right.
I think I like knew, like, oh gosh, what am I going to see? So I didn't at first, and then I started to. And she said, like, baby's head is down, and then moved the wand and was like, here's her heart. And she said that a couple times, and I couldn't hear anything from the ultrasound, and usually you can like hear something.
Mm-hmm.
And no one was saying anything besides the ultrasound tech saying that, and here's her heart. And I feel like she said it a couple times and kept moving the wand around. And I just kept thinking in my head, like, why am I not hearing anything? Should I ask why I'm not hearing anything? Like, what's going on? And so finally, the ultrasound tech, looked at the doctor and was like, Doctor, blank. And so finally the doctor was, said, I'm sorry, Emily, there's is no heartbeat. And I was just, completely in disbelief. I think I like mumbled, like, what, how? I remember the doctor saying something about sometimes this happens, there's no reason. And then said, like, I'm going to go check and see if the room we were in is still available to take you back there. And she left. So I was just with the ultrasound tech, and she like rolled her chair really close to me. And I said something, and I thought I was being audible, but she was like, what did you say? And I think I just said, like, is this real? Like, what is happening? How does she, not have a heartbeat? And, the ultrasound tech was just like, yes, I'm, so sorry. And I could tell, that she was having a hard time too. So the doctor came and got me and took me back into room, the room I had been in. And, I had all my stuff, and she, said, like, you said your husband's taking a test. And I said, yeah, he's done. He texted me right before the appointment saying he was done and to call him when I was, done with the appointment. And she was like, okay, well, do you want to call him? Are you, going to have him come here? Do you want me to send you over to the hospital and he can meet you there? Because the hospital's right across the street. And I was like, I mean, I need to call him. I don't think I can like go home, like drive myself home right now without telling him.
Yeah.
But I was also like scared to death to call him and tell him, because how do you tell like your husband who's, so thrilled about being a dad that, his daughter doesn't have a heartbeat anymore and that she like, died inside of me. So I asked the doctor, I was like, not really expecting an answer, I guess, more of just kind of like talking out loud. But I said, like, yeah, I need to call my husband. But what do I say? Like, what do I say? Like, do I say I need you to come meet me at the doctor's? And then him think like something good is happening and I'm about to like deliver our child, which I was, but not like living. And the doctor said, when I said, like, what do I say? Do I, she said, well, we, call this a intrauterine fetal demise. And I just said, huh?
Yeah.
And I was just thinking, like, intrauterine fetal demise. Like, one, why are you saying that to me right now? And two, why on earth would I tell that to my husband when I call him? Because he's going to have the same reaction. What? So I told her, like, okay, I'm going to call him. And she said that she would leave me alone, or I told her I would ask him to meet me there. And she told me she would leave me alone for a few minutes so I could call him. So I called him and I told him, Dustin, I need you to remain calm. And obviously I was trying to hold myself together. So it wasn't like I was immediately like bawling on the phone. I didn't want him to like immediately freak out. I was like, I have to tell you something. I need you to remain calm. I need you to like be safe. And I said, I need you to come to the doctor's. She doesn't have a heartbeat. And he was like, what? And I was like, she doesn't have a heartbeat. And he was like, well, what does that mean? Do I need to go home and get the hospital bags? And I was like, no, just turn around, come meet me. It means that her heart's no longer beating. And she, I said, like, she died inside of me. And he, finally was like, okay, I'm coming. I'm going to be safe. I will be there as soon as I can. I'm like 20 minutes away. Just, hang on. Do you want me to call anyone? And I was like, no, I just want you to be here. I think he asked me if I'd called my mom. And I said, no, I wanted to call you first before I, told anyone else. I wasn't even thinking of like anyone else at that point besides him. And so I said, I need to get off the phone. She said that she would give me a few minutes to call you. And so I'm assuming she'll come back. So after like 10 minutes, I was still just in this room by myself. Like, I thought like maybe I should call my mom while I have this time, but like my husband's not even here. I've like hardly talked to the doctor really. Like I don't know what any of my next steps are,
Mm-hmm.
My next step was to get my husband there so we could talk to the doctor together. And I was obviously just like a blubbering mess, like going between like hysterically crying to like hardly breathing. So stopping to like take deep breaths, like that feeling when you just can't breathe. And I just felt like my whole world had like shifted, and everything was like different than it was supposed to be and different than I thought it would be. And I was just having a really hard time, like, with like, well, what's going to happen and what do I do? How are we going to survive this? How are we going to get through this? What happens now? And so the doctor hadn't come back in. So I called my husband back because I was just like sick of being alone. I was by myself and just alone with my thoughts. And he was by himself driving, but and so I talked to him until he got there, and he told me he was pulling in. And then within like 2 minutes, he was, in the room with me. Obviously, he came in and I basically like fell into his arms, and we like cried together, and he apologized and said he was so sorry. And I apologized to him, and I just said, like, I don't know how this happened. And so the doctor came back in and told us that, I needed to be induced to deliver her. And I had this moment of like, oh, well, I guess that makes sense that I have to deliver her because she has to like get out somehow. But I hadn't honestly like thought about it.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh yeah, okay.
Yeah, I have to do that too. Yeah, that I forgot about that. Yeah.
Like, yeah, this, and I've always been I don't like needles, and so I've always been like always told people like I'll get pregnant when they have like a chewable tablet I can take to not feel any pain. Like I'm not, and so I have, people would ask me how I felt about childbirth, and I would, say like, oh well, I'll see it when it happens. I try not to think about it, and I knew it would be painful, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh yes, I still have to deliver my baby who is not going to be alive. So like, who cares about the pain of childbirth anymore? Because this is going to be like far more painful. And so I just wasn't even thinking about it. And so she said that this was Thursday. So she said we could go home and, come back to the hospital that night. We could go home and we could stay home, and we'd come back to the hospital on Friday. We could even wait till Saturday if we wanted. But, it was something that kind of needed to be done, because there could be like, I don't know, consequences isn't like the right word, but there could be, I guess, like medical issues, I guess, with her, being like, not alive inside of me. I never like asked what those were, so I have no idea. But it kind of, it was like Dustin had just got there. I had no idea. And so we were like, just both kind of like, well, I guess we'll probably go home and then just come back to the hospital tonight at some point, because, I think I was thinking like, well, what am I going to do at home? Like,
Yeah.
Being home isn't going to change anything. And it kind of felt like we, needed to make a decision like right then, because she said she would let the nurses know. And I don't think that we did, but it was just very much like, no, we'll go to the hospital tonight. But then, so we went home.
No.
And
Oh, can I
then,
interrupt you again, Emily? I apologize.
oh yeah, of course. No, you're fine.
So by that time, had you contacted your mom and other family members?
No,
Not
it
yet.
was still
Still.
just us. No, it was
Okay.
just us. Yeah.
And I'm actually a little curious. So, I just a little bit of context. You guys live in South Carolina,
Yes.
and is there family around you guys or close by?
Um, no, not really. My husband has a sister. He's the oldest, but his oldest sister lives in Greenville, South Carolina, which is
Okay.
about 3 hours from us. So she's close. She's actually going to school for to be a sonographer, and she
Okay.
wants to do like the ultrasound tech for like babies.
Oh.
Yeah, and so and at the time she didn't tell us this when we were having our like healthy pregnancy at the time, but she had had to do one of the ultrasounds where there wasn't like a heartbeat. And so we talked about that afterwards, but that's off topic. But our family is from the Midwest. My family's from Michigan, and his family is from Indiana. And so my parents still live in Michigan, and his parents still live in Indiana. His other siblings live in Indiana, and then my sister and her husband, and then my niece, they live in Washington, D.C. So no, we don't. I mean, we have his sister, but
Yeah. But everybody
no,
else
like,
is not nearby, really.
right, no. So I guess by the time we'd gotten home, we had contacted family. But we live about, because of traffic, probably like 30 minutes from where my doctor was. So we got in the car. And that was the other thing we had, we had driven separately. So it was like, well, whose
Oh,
car do you want to take?
right.
And Dustin was like, we'll just take mine. We'll leave your car here. We had asked, like, can we leave the car here? The hospital's right across the street. So it was like, we'll come back, we'll get it at some point. Um, so we got in the car and we pulled out, and my husband was like, do you want to call your mom? And I was like, yes. But before I call her, how do you feel about having people come? Like, because our family lives far away. So, like, did we want people to come? Did we want it to just be us? I mean, when I thought that I was going to be delivering a healthy, screaming baby, I wanted it to just be Dustin and I in the hospital. I wanted, my mom was going to come for like 2 weeks, but she was going to come like a couple days later after the birth. So she'd get here like maybe the day after we came home so that we could have some time like alone at her house to like, get things settled with her
Yeah.
newborn. And Dustin's mom was going to come maybe like at the same time for a couple days and then come back later after my mom left. And then, his stepdad would maybe come down like later, and then his siblings later. And so I didn't want to just assume like, that we wanted our family to come, because it wasn't just my decision. It was very much like, what do you want? And so I had said like, my mom's going to ask, like, do I want her to come? What can she do? So are we okay with having them come? And Dustin was like, I'm fine if you want your mom to come, if you want your dad to come too, if you want to have your sister come, I understand that. That's fine. And I was like, okay. So I called my mom, and she works at a soup kitchen at our church on Thursdays. And so I knew that she was there. And I think she knew something was wrong, because she knew my appointment was at like 2:30 and it was like 4. And I, knew she was at the soup kitchen. So I usually would just text her, and so she answered, and I was crying, and she said what was wrong. And so I told her that the baby didn't have a heartbeat, and we hadn't told anyone her name. We were keeping that a secret and wanted to tell them afterwards. So the only people who knew her name were my sister, because she's my best friend and I can't keep any secrets from her. And when they had my niece, they kept her name a secret, but they told me. So I felt like it was only fair that I had to tell them.
Yeah.
And then we had told a couple friends that, wouldn't tell our family because they live here. So I didn't even say her name, because it wasn't, at the time, I wasn't registering that other people didn't know her name. I was just like, she doesn't have a heartbeat. And my mom was obviously like distraught and was like, okay, I'm going to leave the soup kitchen. I'm going to grab my stuff. I'm going to go home. Your dad should be home soon. Do you want me to come? Is your sister coming? I haven't called my sister, Mom. I called you first, and my mom was like, do you want me to call your sister? And I was like, no, I'm going to call her. I'm sure she's going to want to come, but will you tell like all of my aunts and stuff? My mom has 5 sisters, 4 of them still alive. And then my dad has 3 sisters, 2 of them still alive. So just like a big family. And so my mom said, like, I'm going to look at flights and I'll let you know. And she was like, I was like, okay, I think we're going to go home and then go to the hospital, but you can get home and then call me later. And she said, okay. So then I called my sister, and she had told me she was leaving early from work because it was actually my brother-in-law's birthday on May 9th. And so I had called her hoping she had left work, but she hadn't. And so, I told her, and then she instantly was, crying as well, and was like, I'm going to get a flight. I'll be there. I'm coming. And I was like, okay, I need to go. I need to call Dustin's parents. So then my husband called his mom, and she's like really bad about having her cell phone charged or having her cell phone even able to ring. So it just rang a couple times. And so he finally called the house, and his younger brother answered, who at the time was 20. He's now 21, but, and, Dustin he was not, he was obviously upset, that he was holding in like his tears, and, he was like, hey, is mom there? And his brother was like, no. And, Dustin kind of mouthed to me like, should I tell him? And I was like, if you want to tell your brother before you tell your mom, but probably like you shouldn't, also like, who knows if he's like home by himself, like that's a lot to put on, his like youngest brother, you know what I mean? So his mom finally called us back, and Dustin like told her, and she was in the car, I think, on their way home from work. Her and Dustin's dad are both teachers as well. So his mom was immediately like, we're going to come, we're going to drive, we'll leave like soon. Just, let us know, but I'll let you know when we leave and we're coming. And Dustin was like, okay. And then, he told his mom, like, can you tell Tess and Sam, and then I'm going to call Emmy. And Emmy is the one who lives in Greenville.
Mm.
And we have the same name. So we're both Emily, and she's not married. So we both have the same last name. So that's kind of funny. But so he called her, but she didn't answer. And so he knew that she only lives 3 hours away. So he knew that he wanted to like invite her to come as well if she wanted to like see Margaret. And at this point, still hadn't told anyone like her name or anything. And so we like get home, and we have a dog, as I mentioned. So it was very much like we had put a plan in place for like what we were going to do as Remus when I went into labor, because I had that elevated blood pressure. And so we just never, knew. And so we had like a friend who said that they would, watch Remus. They had recently moved like into our like subdivision, so they were a lot closer, and we had extra keys made, and we had previously like given her a key like a couple days earlier, but her phone just kept going to voicemail. And like it wasn't even ringing. And so it was like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do with Remus? Well, I have a friend who lives like across the way from us, and so she was actually pregnant as well. And so she had texted me how my appointment was, and I had texted back like, not good. She has no heartbeat. And she like immediately called me, but I didn't answer because it was like, too much. And so my husband like walked over there and asked her if they could take Remus until like we got a hold of our other friend. And so she was like, yes, don't worry about it. We will talk to her and we will figure everything out. So after we did that, it was pretty much just like a mix of like we'd already packed our hospital bags, because again, I was 37 weeks. So, we were trying to do that. So it was more so like, what is in this hospital bag that I don't need? Oh, these lactation cookies. I'm not going to need those anymore, though I'm still probably going to lactate, but I probably don't want to. So, like her diaper bag was packed. We had put like couple outfits in there. We didn't know how big she would be. I had bought a matching robe and like swaddle, so I had those, and I was like, well, I still want them, I think. And so the only thing I ended up taking out of her diaper bag was the 2 diapers I'd put in there, because I was like, well, she doesn't need a diaper. But I wish that I had put those in there, because when we delivered her and they were, like putting a diaper on her, Dustin was like, we have diapers. We can put one of our diapers on. And I was like, oh no, I took those out.
Yeah.
And, now I wish like I had left it, because I had opened those. So then it would have been like, oh, this is the brand, this is the diaper she wore.
Yeah.
So it was very much just alternating between trying to do things, and then we'd like lay in our bed and like cry. And then we'd like go into the nursery to grab something, and then we'd like sit on the floor and cry. And then we have a like twin bed in like our loft area. And so we would sit on that and cry. It was like every time we moved to a different room, we would just do something and then like cry. And it was just like, how is this happening? Who else do we need to call? Dustin called our principal and told them, and was like, what do we do about taking days off? Because we were still in session, and you can only take like 3 days off without like approval. So we can only do 3 days, and someone else has to do the rest like consecutively. And so he was like, take as much time as you need. And I was like, when Dustin hung up, I was like, did he understand what you were saying? Like that she's like dead? And Dustin was like, I think so. And I was like, okay, I couldn't tell. It didn't necessarily sound like you did.
Yeah. You never quite know.
And so we just like alternated. And at this point, my sister is texting me. She must have like immediately either texted or called her husband, and she was like, he found a flight. I can be there tonight at like 7. I can rent a car. Don't worry about getting me. And I was like, okay, if you can Uber, rent a car. My car's actually across the street at the doctor's office. We have the keys. We can give it to you, and you can drive like our car home. So that'll be easy. You'll have the car for the rest of the time. And I like my mom had texted me that she had found a flight, and that she could be there by like, I don't know, 11 a.m. on Friday morning. And so, I was just kind of, um, like switching between my phone and like doing things. And I was pretty much ignoring texts from anyone besides like my mom or my sister
Right.
or Dustin's family. Then my sister texted back, like, never mind. David was looking at the wrong weekend.
Oh, darn.
I will be there tomorrow. I have a flight. I can't get there until 4, but I'll be there, And then my mom was like, the flight sold out. I'll be there. I'm coming. I'll be there at like 5 on Friday. That was like the only flight I, could get. And I was like, okay. And so, I don't know why we were at her house. Dustin like called one of his friends because he felt like he needed to tell someone. And so I was like, okay. And he, just wanted them to know. And then we pretty much just texted everyone else.
Yeah.
It was like, I don't have energy to call anyone.
Mm-hmm.
I also don't want to like not show up for work tomorrow. And then people think that I'm like in labor with a living baby. So
Yeah.
I texted like someone from work that I'm pretty close with. He's like my next door room partner.
Mm-hmm.
And I said like, I think I just copied a text and it said something like, there was no heartbeat at my doctor's appointment today. My baby died inside of me. And then that's pretty much what I sent to people, which looking back now is like not the, I wish I would have said something more like, we love her so much. We, it
Yeah.
just, I don't think anyone was thinking like, oh gosh, she's being so crass. You know what I mean? But, she obviously means like the world to me. And so I feel like my text message didn't convey that, but I mean, it makes sense because I was in shock and still didn't quite believe it was happening and thought like, hopefully I'd show up at the hospital and it would be a mistake.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
And so then my friend from work, I like apologized. I was like, I'm sorry to tell you this like crappy news in a text, but I just, wanted you to know, can you let so and so know at work? We already told the principal, but, just tell anyone who asks so that they don't have to ask us. And so eventually we left the house. We had, Remus taken care of. Someone was going to come get him. And we made sure we like took him out, to pee until they could get there. And Dustin loaded up the car and we drove to the hospital and we got there probably at like 7:30. And, you have to check in the ER. And then they were like, oh, well, they mentioned that you might be coming, but they weren't sure. So we don't have everything quite ready. But it was like, I felt like we had left the doctor's office saying, like, yes, we're going to go tonight.
Yeah.
Okay. So anyway, they, wheeled me, put me in a wheelchair and wheeled me to a room with Dustin walking behind me carrying some things. And like, we were in the elevator with someone who was carrying like a baby gift bag and they had like were getting ready to get in the elevator and the person who was pushing my wheelchair said something to them like, can we use this elevator? And they said yes. And I think he was asking them like, we need to go without you.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because and then they still stood in there. So then he said it again and they were like, yeah, come on in. And so he eventually just went in there, but I could tell like he I think wanted them to be out because they had like a welcoming like baby gift bag.
Mm-hmm.
So they pushed me to the room and Dustin was behind me and I guess I was in room 8. But I didn't even notice that. Dustin did. And the nurse, she took over from the guy who was pushing me. And she was like, another nurse was like, oh, is this the IUD patient? And I kept thinking like, IUD, like I don't have an IUD. What are they talking about? But now I think back to how the doctor said intrauterine fetal demise. And I think that's like their code. So, I was all the way like at the end of the room, at the end of the hallway.
Yep. Kind of tucked away from everybody else, right?
Yep, tucked away. And so they put me in a bed. They had me change into a gown. The nurse came in, like introduced herself to Dustin and I. And then she started going over stuff with me, like, the paperwork and stuff. And Dustin was going in and out, bringing in the rest of the stuff. And we, I don't think she brought up anything like overly important why he was gone. But he, was walking out and I think he like called a couple people. I think he finally got a hold of his sister. And anyway, so the nurse, she was very friendly, but just, all these things like once Dustin was finally in the room, like, have you thought about cremation or burial, or do you know where you want to send her body? And I was just like, no.
Nobody had ever said anything to you up to that point,
Yeah,
right?
of course I have no idea. We haven't even discussed whether we want to be cremated or like
Yeah.
buried with our body. Like it was just like, huh? And I was like, I don't know. And then I remember saying like, do people like, do you have funerals for like this? And then I was like, well, duh, Emily, of course you do, because it's like a human being,
Mhm.
like it's a baby. But it was just so like, I mean, just so completely opposite of anything you ever think you're gonna have to deal with. And so I think I said to eventually she left, and I said to Dustin, like, are you thinking like cremation or cremation and burial or like body burial? And he was like, I guess cremation. And I was like, okay, that's kind of where I was. So let's just do that. Like, I don't really want to think about it too much. We can do cremation. We're not from here. Chances are we could move from South
Yeah.
Carolina. I wouldn't want to like leave her here, so it was like, okay, we're just going to have her cremated. But there was all these other things. She brought in packets for funeral homes, packets for grief, a specific packet for dad's grief and how it's okay to cry. Why my husband was like already crying buckets and
Yeah.
was like, clearly I don't have a problem crying. Clearly I'm not the dad they're talking about in this packet. I have no problem showing emotion. And she asked whether we wanted to have a photographer come in, and I was like, I don't know. I mean, I wanted to do newborn photos, but and she gave us a pamphlet for the Now I Lay Me Down to Sleep organization.
Mhm.
And we looked at that, and then Dustin was like, yeah, I think we should do them. And so she came back in, and I was like, yes, we'd like to do these. And she was like, okay, and they are completely free. And we were like, oh, okay, cool. um
Mhm.
just all these things. And yeah, at some point they like right 9:30 they gave me, I think, cytotech to thin
To
my
start.
cervix.
Mhm.
And that was kind of, she checked my, how far I was dilated. And then I think at that point, like, my sister called me to see how I was doing, to let me know like what time she'd be in, how she was either going to Uber, or my one of my friends had texted her and offered to pick her up. And how my mom, the flight was whatever, so she wasn't going to get there till later. And then my mom and dad called me, and that was hard because I hadn't talked to my dad yet. And so having hearing him like lose it on the phone, that's like a lot. Anytime,
Yeah.
my dad is like emotional, but he's not like super in his feelings a lot. And the first time that I probably like really remember him like overly being super emotional and crying was when my like his sister died, and we were at her funeral. um and so that was just a lot. And my mom had told me that my dad wasn't going to come, because the flight was really expensive for her. And since my sister was coming, my dad kind of felt like he might be in the way, or I didn't
Yeah.
necessarily need him because my mom was going to be there. And my mom had mentioned like he doesn't want you to be mad at him. And so I told him on the phone, like, of course I'm not going to be mad at you if you don't come. Like, I understand. It's expensive. It was a lot for my mom to come, and my
Right.
dad is a tax accountant, and so tax season was just ending, and they had just been in DC visiting my sister. So it was like I understood he needed to do work, and my mom was going to stay for a week, and so that would have been a lot for my dad to stay that long too. So I understood, but I felt like he needed to hear me say like, I'm not going to be mad at you. And so then I said, oh, can I tell you her name?
Oh, this is the
You
first
know,
time.
yeah, I was like, oh, you guys don't even know her name. And my mom was like, yes. And I was like, okay, we named her Margaret Bernice. And Margaret is the name of my dad's grandmother. So my great grandma.
Yeah.
And she lived until I was like 12. So it's not someone that I never met. It's
Yeah.
not someone I didn't know. She had like a super sharp, intact mind until the day she died. She didn't have like Alzheimer's or dementia or anything.
Mm-hmm.
So I we used to go visit her all the time. So I really knew her, and she was a great woman. And she also, my sister has Margaret as her middle name after my grandma. And then Bernice is after my mom's mom. So my grandma, who died when I was 7. And so, that I think was, I don't know if it was necessarily hard for them, but I think it was like, we had picked this name to kind of like honor these people, and it
Yeah.
was such a pretty name. And then, she wasn't like alive.
Yeah.
Um, so anyway, I told them the name, and then Dustin was like, "Oh, my parents don't know either." Like, I should call them. I want to see where they are. So he called them. They were, on their way driving. They said that they'd probably be there at like 8 in the morning, but they'd probably stop and sleep, but they'd let us know. It's about 11 hours from where they live to get to where we live. So Dustin's mom had thought that she knew the name that we were picking, and she was convinced that it was Sonnet because we're both English teachers.
Right.
And she apparently knew someone whose name was Sonnet. And she hadn't told us what she thought it was, but she had wrote it down in case she was right, so that we believed her. So when we told her Margaret Bernice, she was just like, "Oh, it's beautiful. That's not what I thought." And then she told us she thought it was Sonnet, and I just like laughed. I was like, "Sonnet? What?" No offense to anyone whose daughter's name is Sonnet.
Yeah.
But I was just like, no. And I knew that there was no way his mom was going to figure out what we were naming her,
Right.
because, but it was just, it was funny that she had Sonnet and not like, a super common name like Rachel or something.
Mm-hmm.
And so it eventually occurred to me, like, man, they gave me this medicine, but I like have no idea how this is working. Like, I had no idea how long it was going to be until I was going to give birth.
Yeah.
So finally the nurse came back in, and I said something like, "So what is like the process?" And she was like, "Okay, so we can give you the cytotech like every 6 hours. So around 3:30, the doctor will come in and check your cervix again and see whether we need to give you another thing, whether we should give you Pitocin." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And I should also mention that when they hooked me up to the monitor, I was having contractions. And she said, "Oh, do you feel that?" And I was like, "Feel what?" And she was like, "You're having contractions." Oh, that's interesting. No, I don't feel them. And then she would, anytime she was in the room and the thing would go off, she'd be like, "Oh, you're having one right now. Do you feel that?" And I was like, "No."
Nothing. Okay.
And I feel as though I do not have a high pain tolerance. So I have no idea what that was about. But maybe because I was in shock, and I don't know. And so the doctor came back in, I don't know, at some point and said, like, "Are you going to have an epidural?" And at that time, my whole pregnancy, I had been like, "I don't know if I'm going to have an epidural. I'd like to not have one. So I guess I'm going to just kind of say like, yeah, I think I might want one, but I'm going to wait until I like, know what the pain feels like to fully decide." And so I kind of said like, "Well, I'm not sure." And the doctor was like, "Well, I think you should have one. There's no reason to be in more pain than you're already in." And my husband was like, "I think you should have one." And I was like, "Okay, I'll have one." So at some point I was decided I was getting an epidural. And so the night kind of just went on with different like questions. And, the nurse asked if we wanted the chaplain to come in the morning. We said, sure. She asked if we thought we were going to have an autopsy. Again, something else I had never thought of. We felt like it was kind of discouraged.
You felt like it was discouraged to get an
Yeah,
autopsy.
because I asked, like, what do most people usually do? And she was like, "Well, a lot of people don't get them because a lot of insurances don't cover them. And a lot of times, there's no results like found."
Mm-hmm.
And so it was kind of like, okay, we hadn't fully decided we weren't going to get one, but it just kind of seemed like, and the doctor said that too. It wasn't just the nurse. So we did kind of feel like and we feel like that was a mistake and we should have had one. So Dustin like pulled the futon really close to my bed. And he fell asleep, I think. I really did not. I was like in and out of closing my eyes like all night. I had to hit the button to go to the bathroom because the nurse had to come in.
Mm-hmm.
At like 3:30, she came in to tell me that the doctor would be in soon, but she was in like an emergency surgery. And so that's why she hadn't been in yet. And I was like, okay, well, I have to go to the bathroom anyway. So she took me to the bathroom. So then it was like 4-ish and I was kind of like sleeping, not really sleeping, but I had my eyes closed and blah, blah. And I like kind of felt something warm like trickle down, and I hit the button, and I was like, I think I peed myself. And she was like, I'll come in and check because you just went to the bathroom. And I was like,
Maybe
I don't know,
not.
maybe it's my water breaking, but I don't know. So she like came in and she like checked, and she was like, yes, your water has broken. And she I like my husband was like not waking up really, and I
Hmm.
felt like we were being kind of loud, and she had turned on the light. And so I sleep with a baby blanket that I've had since I was born, that my sister actually gave me when I was born. And I had taken them to the hospital, and I originally wasn't going to. That was like my birth plan. I was gonna not sleep with my blankie or my stuffed animal moose anymore because I was gonna have a baby. And I was finally like, okay, I'm ready to like give them up. But when we got home from the doctor's office and I knew she didn't have a heartbeat, I was like, I am taking this blanket and
Yep.
this moose with me, and I'm going to sleep with them for the rest of my life.
Yeah. Hmm.
And so I threw my baby blanket at him, and it like hit his face, and he finally like kind of startled awake. And I was like, my water broke. And he was like, oh. And so the doctor like came in shortly after that, and they were like, okay, do you want to take a shower to clean up? This might be like the last time you can shower before you like deliver. And I was like, okay, sure, sounds fine, because I did feel kind of like gross, and why not take a
Right.
shower? Who knows
Hmm.
how long labor is going to take? And then the shower. So Dustin help me gets in the shower, and all of a sudden I started feeling contractions. Like I was like, oh, okay, this is what this feels like, and this does
Oh.
not feel good. And I was like, woo, and I, got out of the shower and into like, the bed, and I was like, and she was like, at that point it was probably like five something, and she was like, okay, I just want you to know that we're, getting everything ready for your epidural. The anesthesiologist is in like a doing the surgery. So, he'll be in soon. And I kind of took that to like, I didn't know how fast anything was going to go. So I
Hmm.
kind of was thinking, like, oh my gosh, am I not going to get an epidural? It was like, I
Yeah.
wasn't
Yeah.
sure that I wanted one, but then, like, yeah, the doctor's right. Like, I don't need to be in any more pain than I'm already in. And so we just, like waited for him. And I just, like, Dustin did a good job, like holding my hand and doing whatever I needed him to do. We had bought an essential oil thing, and so we had read that the peppermint was like good, so he had put peppermint on a washcloth and like was putting that on my forehead. And eventually the anesthesiologist came and gave me the epidural, and by that point it was like I was just like shaking.
Oh, really?
And
Oh.
yeah, and he like had me like sit up, and I was just like shaking, like my legs are shaking, and the nurse was saying like, you need to hold still. And he was like, it's okay, I'll let her know when she needs to hold still. And Dustin was just, kind of like anchoring me to the spot. But he gave me whatever they give you first for the epidural, and um it like hardly hurt. It pinched a little, I guess. And then,
Hmm.
I had the epidural, and then I started feeling tingly, and it was like, man, why have I spent my whole life thinking that this epidural like really hurts? Because it didn't hurt. And now I'm starting to like not feel my contractions as much.
Hmm.
And that's like welcoming, because it's like, oh, okay, I'm already like in a ton of pain. So then Dustin's parents, I think, had told him that they got there. And so they came in the room after I had the epidural. So I think they came in around like 8 a.m. Maybe it was later than that. It might have been like 9. I had said to the nurse, like, they had checked me again, and I was like, I don't know, 8 centimeters dilated. Like, after my water broke and I took a shower and they checked, I think I was at 4 centimeters. And
Oh.
then yeah, so like super quick,
Hmm.
because I had only been at one before. So then she came in and was like, I'm going to check again, but I'll wait till you have the epidural. And then when I had the epidural, I think I was like at 8.
Yeah,
And
that was quick.
yeah, and I said, like, okay, so like what happens now? Like, I can't really feel anything. So how am I going to know? And she was like, well, if you start feeling like, some pressure. And I was like, okay. So Dustin's parents were there, and oh, the chaplain came to see us before Dustin's parents got there, and he asked us if we needed help with anything. So we asked him if he could find us a place for like cremation, so that way we didn't have to do it. And he said yes. We asked him if he could look up like grief groups for us. He said yes, and he prayed with us, and he was very nice, and he asked if we would like her to be baptized, and we said sure. Um, so he was very helpful. So then Dustin's parents came in, and then around like 10, they were like, we asked them to get a couple items from our house, because by then we had decided we were going to have the No Lay Me Down to Sleep photographer. And so we had thought like, oh, we might want some things. We realized that we didn't bring any books to the hospital for her.
Yeah.
And we were obviously big like readers. We had read to her throughout the whole pregnancy. So we wanted to be able to read her a book. So we sent them home to our house to get some of those things for us. And so I was starting to kind of feel like some pressure just as they were like, okay, we're going to go. And as soon as they like walked out the door, I like hit my nurse button. I was like, I'm feeling some pressure.
Mm-hmm.
She came in and she was like, oh, yes, I see her. Okay. And she was like, I'm going to like call for the doctor, just, like don't do anything. And I think it was like 15 minutes later. And I was like, I'm feeling like a lot of pressure. And she was like Margaret was like coming out before, as the doctor was like putting on her whatever, like arm scrubs and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then she finally got over there, and the nurse was like, okay, give me just one push. And I was just like, okay, but how do I do that? Because I can't feel anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I was just like, okay, I guess I'm going to like act like I have to poop. And so that was it. And she came out, and Dustin watched. He had been by me holding my hand, and then when she told me to push, he kind of moved down there, and so he watched her come out. And the whole time during my pregnancy, he had said like he wasn't going to watch, he didn't want to see that, and then it was like, now he just didn't want to miss anything.
Yeah.
I wish that I could have seen it. So I had a non-complicated vaginal delivery. I didn't have any tears or anything.
Wow.
I know. So that was like
That's
I
a
call them
blessing.
like small blessings.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It was like, okay, at least I'm okay. But so she was born at 10:21 on May 10th, and she was 5 pounds and 10 ounces and 19 inches long when she was delivered. And how I was feeling was just, I was so sad, obviously, but it was also like this beautiful moment because she was so beautiful and so
Mm-hmm.
perfect, and she was absolutely ours. But I was heartbroken and devastated at the same time. But I was happy because I was finally seeing her and meeting her, even though she wasn't meeting me. And then it was just, she's just this wonderful like human that Dustin and I had created and had loved so much for 37 weeks. And yeah. And I guess that's the birth story.
What did you do right after the birth? Did you hold her? Did you?
Yeah, so they had asked me if I wanted to, before the birth, had asked me if I wanted to hold her first or if I wanted them to clean her a little. And I said I wanted to hold her first because that's what I originally wanted to do when I, thought things were going to be so different. So they cut her cord and, gave her to me in the blanket. And then I think stared at her for a while and held her. And then I said to Dustin, like, do you want to hold her? And of course he said yes. And he held her and he gave her back to me. And then we were like, okay, you can clean her up now. And then they, were over there doing that. And they like weighed her and stuff. And so Dustin like went over to the little thing to like watch, and I was like trying to watch from my bed, but all I could do is turn my head.
Right.
And it was like I couldn't even really see her because there were these two like adult bodies.
Yeah.
And so then they cleaned her and they gave her back, and then from there we held her for a while. We took some like different pictures of us with her. I asked Dustin, like, the timestamp on my phone says like 10:40, so we must have had her back by 10:40. And I asked Dustin to take like a picture of me holding her, and the pictures are just so like, I mean, I just like, this is what pain looks like I'm heartbroken, it's like it. And then I gave Margaret to Dustin, and he went and sat on the like futon and like held her in his hands and opened up like her little blanket and was just like staring at her. And then from there we gave her a bath. We changed her or cleaned her, I guess. You're not submerging her or anything.
Right.
We changed her diaper. We dressed her in these pajamas we had bought that were newborn, because again we didn't know how big she would be, so they had Like they were like a rainbow and had like a rainbow on the butt, and then on the top said like "love you more." So we put her in that. We put her in this, wrapped her in the swaddle that matched the robe, and put the headband on her that matched her swaddle. So her swaddle and her headband matched my robe. Once we had her in her swaddle and her headband, I was holding her, and he brought some of the peppermint oil over, and he put it like on his finger, and then he rubbed it on her forehead, and he said, "There, now you smell like mom." And so now, whenever we use the essential oils, I use the peppermint a lot because to me, the peppermint is like the smell of her, because he did that, and I had smelled like that at the time too. So that's really special for me. We sang to her, we read to her, held her, kissed her. Eventually, we had his parents come in, probably like, I don't know, 3 or so hours after she was born. And they held her for a little bit. And then the nurse came in to tell us that now I lay me down to sleep. People were going to come at 4. And I remembered something else that I wanted from our house. So I'm so thankful that Dustin's parents were like willing to go back there. Like I mentioned before, our house was like a half hour away,
Yeah.
and here they had already driven for like 11 hours. But
Mm-hmm.
I had bought these wooden blocks that went together that said Margaret, and they like would stand up on a bookshelf. And the reason why I bought them was because I have some from when I was a kid that spell out my name in different colors. And so I always like played with it when I was a kid. And so I wanted her to have one. And so I remembered that I was like, oh, I want to have this for the pictures so they could, be there. So
Yeah, that's
Dustin's
great.
dad was like, yes, of course I'll go back and get it. So they left, and then and Dustin's sister was there by that point too. So one of his sisters, so she came in and held her for a little bit, and then they left, and I think they mostly just like sat in the waiting room, and just were like there if we needed them.
Yeah.
And we had a cuddle cot, and so they had that, and they put that in like the little like panda thing that they have for
Mm-hmm.
babies. But I mean, honestly, I held her most of the time anyway, or Dustin did. I mean, especially that first day on Friday. Like, I mean, I think it was like I was finally able to move around, and I wanted to take a shower before the now I lay me down to sleep people came, maybe at like 2 or something. And
Mm-hmm.
I like Dustin was going to go to the gift shop to try to buy her flowers. And so I finally set her in the cuddle cot. But then I said to him, he was like, I'm going to go buy flowers. Is that okay? And I was like, sure. And then the nurse was like, oh, well, if he's going to go buy flowers, I'm going to stay in here to make sure you don't like fall in the shower, which I hadn't even been thinking about.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But I said to Dustin, like, well, do you have to go now? I want you to hold her. I don't want her to get cold.
Yeah.
Which is like the whole purpose of the cuddle cot,
Yeah.
just to help them preserve their body. But to me, it was just like, I wanted her to be warm. She's a
Yeah.
baby. She needs to be warm. It was not connecting in my head that she was not supposed to be warm. And they kept telling us like the night before, like, we have a cuddle cot. You can stay with your daughter as long as you want. I've listened to your other podcast, so I know that some people have said that they have been told that they can only have like 24 hours with their child.
Yeah.
That wasn't the case for us. They told us that we could stay for days if we wanted to.
Oh,
That
wow.
they had people who, like, a doctor goes home for their like 12-hour shift, and they come back like 2 days later, and the family is still there. So they told us all this, but they never really said what the cuddle cot was for.
Yeah.
They didn't say like it's to help preserve her body.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I just, it was not connecting to me. And then Dustin was like, well, I think she probably needs to, like, we've been holding her a lot, so it'd probably be good for her to be in that. And then I was like, oh, you're right. And it finally was like, oh, this is supposed to be keeping her cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now I understand. So we had a cuddle cot, and I know from listening to the podcast that some people like hold their child on the like cuddle cot blanket, like in
Yeah.
their arms, but I didn't even realize that that was something that we could have done. So,
Oh, shoot.
yeah, I mean, but it's whatever. Um,
So many
and
what ifs,
so,
right?
yeah, exactly, I know. And so then we had her baptized before the Now Lay Me Down to Sleep person came, and then they came around 4, and took pictures. And then by the time they were done was pretty much when my sister arrived. And then my mom got there, and then Dustin's parents and sister came in to say goodbye and that they were going to stay in a hotel overnight, and then they were going to leave the next day, since my family was there. And so we said, like, okay. And at some point, my mom and sister left, and we had taken a baby book. I had bought like a baby book, and so they did her handprints and her footprints in that for us.
Oh, good.
And after the pictures, and they cut some of her hair. That was Dustin. He had that idea. He had the idea to, I mean, I had taken the baby book, it was in the backpack, and I always wanted to have footprints, but I was just in so much shock that I like couldn't even think of like anything. And I don't know that had he have not been like, oh, we should do this. But when I was getting in labor still, he was Googling things about like stillbirths and what to do when you have a stillbirth, and he found something that talked about memories you could make. And so that's how he was like, we need to give her a bath, we need to do this, we need to get her footprints, we need to get her hair. And I just think like, thank God for him, because
Yeah.
I wanted all those things, and I'm so glad that we have them. But I was just in so much shock that I don't know that I would have been like, yeah, can you cut some of her hair?
Yeah,
um
really, what a blessing. I'm
I
so glad that he
know.
did that. That's amazing.
Yeah, me too. And I never would have thought of giving her a bath either. And we have met obviously people who have lost their children in the same way, and they're like, wow, we didn't give our daughter a bath. I wish we had
Yeah.
thought of that. And it's just like, yeah, but how can you think of those things when they're like happening to you? So I am glad that Dustin Googled and found that. And so then everyone left, and it was just us. And we kept holding her, and singing to her and kissing her, and talking to her, and doing all these things. And then I think around like 10, the nurse gave me some Ambien to try to sleep. And Dustin pulled his bed like real close to me, and we were like holding hands. And um, I did sleep, but only until like 3 a.m. And then I woke up around 3 a.m. just like screaming. And
Really?
I went over to her little bassinet where she was. Yeah. And I just was like screaming. At the time, I didn't really think I was overly loud, but I was like apparently hysterically crying. And the nurse like ran in. So I guess she could hear me in the hallway.
Oh,
And it obviously woke Dustin up. And the nurse like sat with me on the bed. And this was a new nurse because of the shifts.
yeah.
And she was like, can I get you anything? Would you like a Xanax? And I was like, no, I just want my baby. I just need her. I just don't understand. And I finally like calmed down a little bit, and so she left. And so then I, just went back over to her bassinet, and I just wanted to like stare at her. And so Dustin was like, why don't we lay down? You can lay on the futon with me, and we can put her in the middle. And I was like, okay. So we put her in the middle of us, and we just talked to her. I mean, we didn't fall back asleep. We talked to her until like the sun was up, and we talked to her about us and our family, her family members, like her grandparents, her aunts and uncles, her cousin, um, her dog, just everything that we wanted for her, and everything that we were so sorry she didn't get to experience. And just we were so sorry that this happened to her, and that we just loved her so much, and we were going to miss her. We were going to make sure to talk about her, and we hoped that she would get to meet the people that she was named after when she got to heaven, that they'd be there for her. And um, we, I think, sang to her again. And I mean, we just like told her everything, and how we were looking forward to so many things, and how everything just changed. Um, so we spent a lot of time with her, and at some point, I guess we woke up and we put her back in the cuddle cot blanket for a while, and um, they came in and said, did I want to be like discharged that day, or anything? And I guess like Dustin and I kind of felt like, yeah, we did want to go home. Like we didn't want to leave her,
Right.
obviously, but it was also like not comforting being at the hospital
At all.
and just like at some point we're going to have to leave. I just wanted to like be out of there. Not that I wanted to leave her, but so we decided that we would get discharged that day if that was okay. And we would keep her with us until we got discharged. And they said that, of course, that was fine. I didn't want to leave her in the room without me, but I also didn't want to like have her leave before I was leaving.
Oh,
I,
okay.
I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't I didn't want to be in the room without her, I
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah.
Um, so we weren't planning on having a funeral or a memorial service because our family is not from here. We didn't want people to feel like they had to come, and we
Yeah.
didn't really want to like have a funeral and memorial service where like a bunch of people we worked with would come, and it just seemed like very like we're not ready to be around people. And so
Yeah.
we had decided that we wanted to have like a special like service with just the three of us, like us saying like goodbye to her. And so we each wrote her a letter, and then we decided like, okay, we'll have this before we leave. The last thing we'll do is we'll have this special ceremony with her, and we'll read her our letters, and we'll read her a book again, and we'll sing to her, and we'll pray with her, and that'll be like our goodbye, so that we feel like we have done something to say goodbye to her,
Yeah.
and not just like give her to the nurses. um and so the doctor came in and like did her rounds, and then basically the nurse came in and said like, okay, at any time you can go. And I had asked, we had taken pictures obviously on our phone and with the Now I Lay Me Down to Sleep, but I didn't want to send Margaret like away without us, and I wanted her to have like a picture with her of us with her.
Oh,
So I asked the nurse if she could take a picture, and the nurses had already taken some pictures of her too for
yeah.
the like memento box. Um, but that was the day before, and so I asked the nurse, "Would you mind like taking one of the three of us so you can print it and then put it with her so she can be like cremated with it?" And the nurse was like, "Of course." Um, and so they did that. So we had her cremated with the letters that we wrote, and with the picture of us, and with the one of the books that we had read to her, um I think called I Love You to the Moon and Back, with a polar bear on it.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Our song that we danced to at our wedding was To the Moon and Back by Dolly Parton, and so we sang that song to her a lot when we were pregnant. So the book had that title, so it was one of the books I wanted. um the other book we read to her was the I'll Love You Forever book,
Mm-hmm.
which was the only book actually that Dustin and I had picked out together and bought her, because I had a baby shower where I asked people to bring books instead of cards.
Yeah.
So we had a bunch of books, and Dustin had never read the I'll Love You Forever book. And I just thought, wow, I can't believe you never read this. I love this book. I used to read this all the time at the bookstore when I was a kid. And then since Margaret, I found out that that book was written for the man's like stillborn children.
Oh, I did
And
not know that.
yeah, and I did not know that at the time, but yes, I think he had stillborn twins, maybe.
Oh,
Yeah, there's an article about it somewhere. And so that one, it was just like, oh wow, that's kind of like symbolic. But we did not have her cremated with that book. We kept that one, and it's still in her diaper bag. Um, and so
I just want to say something about how you guys had the pictures, the picture of your family, the letters that you wrote to her, and the book that you read cremated with her. I think that's so lovely. I did not realize that you could do that. Did they just tell you that, or did you just say, "Can we do this?" And they said yes? And
um, yeah, I to be honest, I don't know. I think I said that I'd like these to like go with her, and the nurse was like, absolutely.
perfect.
They can be like cremated with her. And she was in her, we had changed. So with the Now I Lay Me Down to Sleep people, we had taken pictures in the swaddle and the headband. And then we had taken the swaddle and the headband off and put her in a onesie
Mm-hmm.
as well, like a gray onesie with some flowers on it, just to not clash with like Dustin's outfit as much. And so the that's what the photographer suggested. Like, do you have
Oh,
another, outfit? But maybe she just wanted, us to have a couple different outfits. I
yeah.
don't know.
Hmm.
And so we kept her in the onesie, but we wanted the swaddle and the headband back. And so in my like memento box from the hospital, there was like, one of those like white gowns,
Hmm.
with the bonnet. And so we had laid that out on top of her and asked the nurse if she could bring the swaddle and the headband back, but then put Margaret into the robe
Right.
or the
The
gown to be
mhm.
cremated in. But that we didn't want her to take the onesie off, that we wanted her to be cremated in the onesie too, because it was from us and we kept her, pajamas. So I didn't
Mhm.
even think about keeping the onesie. Yeah, she was just like, yes, of course. She never said like, I don't know if things can be cremated with her. She was just like, yes, of course it can all go.
Yeah, I'm sure they've
Um,
seen it a lot. So I just hadn't, that's one of those things. I'm like, I did not know that you could do that. And now I know.
yeah,
That's great.
I'm. I mean, now that I think about it, I guess I didn't know either. But I just was really like, I did not want her to go anywhere without knowing, like, without having us. It
Yeah.
was like, I guess, was comforted by the fact that she would have a picture of Dustin and I with her, because we were going to have pictures of her with us, and to look at, and I wanted her to have something.
Yeah.
Um, so we did our, goodbye ceremony and kissed her a lot and held her one last time. And then we told the nurse that we were ready for her to, come and take her. Um, and she told us that she'd take her and she'd take off the swaddle and the headband and she'd bring those back to us and then she'd wheel us out. And Dustin had already taken like a bunch of the other stuff out to the car so that he didn't have to come, back in. And we asked, we asked where she was going to go. And she said she was going to take her and put her in a bassinet in the, like, old nursery area where they have the windows or whatever. Um, and so she, I was like, okay, I just, don't want anyone to steal her. I was just so worried that something was going to happen
Yeah.
to her. And she assured us that, she would be safe. And so she came to wheel her out and then was like, well, I'm not ready to say goodbye to you, but I know that you have to go and I have to go. So I just kissed her again and we told her that we loved her. And then they wheeled her away. And then the nurse came in and, had to wheel me out. And Dustin had gone out to pull up the car. So we waited and then we headed home. And my mom and my sister had been at our house. They were staying, but they had told us that they had texted me that they were going to leave so that when we got home, it could just be like the two of us if we, wanted it to be, and that they would, come back a little later. So just to let them know when we were home.
How was that going home?
Hard, but also like, I guess at least my house is more comforting than the hospital.
Yeah.
Like, I had all these things that were hers, even though they weren't really hers because she didn't use them, but they were for her. Her nursery was done. So we just, had, it was like she was here, even though, she wasn't.
Yeah.
But it was, we got home and brought in our stuff, and our dog was here. Our friends had dropped our dog off. So that was nice. He was like super on high alert.
Yeah.
Like knew, I think, something was wrong and something was missing. And we pretty much brought our stuff in and came up to our bed and like laid down and tried to like go to sleep because we were just so exhausted and so distraught. But had a hard time sleeping, obviously. And then eventually I heard my mom and my sister come back. So I went downstairs to see them.
I'm so sorry. I'm so, so sorry. Emily, did the doctors say anything conclusive about why Margaret passed away?
No, we got some conflicting information actually. So my doctor that I had met on Thursday for the first time was actually at the hospital on Friday
Mm-hmm.
and was supposed to be the one delivering Margaret. But when Margaret was coming out, the two doctors were in the surgery together. And so the one doctor that came was not my doctor.
Mm.
And so, which was fine. She was nice. Um, and she did a really good job of, after delivery, like reiterating to me, like, this is not your fault. This is not anything that you did. Like, I know that it might feel that way, and it's okay if you feel that way, but you need to know that it is not your fault. She did a very good job of, that, like,
Yeah, that's great.
and so when she was born, she had the umbilical cord around her neck, which I didn't see, but Dustin saw and saw them like move it real fast. And so, I asked the doctor, like, was the cord around her neck? And the doctor said yes. And so then we were like, is that, the reason for this? And the doctor said, well, we can never, say for sure, but probably it's very likely. So we were like, okay. And that was pretty much right after she was delivered. So we
Mm-hmm.
felt like, okay, it was an umbilical cord accident. Then my doctor came in an hour or so later and, went over the information with us, wanted to see how we were doing, and said that. And I said, like, she said the cord was wrapped around her neck. And she said, yes, but it was a very loose, like, nuchal cord. And so that's probably not the cause.
Hmm.
So we felt very conflicted, like, okay,
Yeah.
but you didn't deliver her, so you didn't see it. So we asked the other doctor to come back in. And I think this was after my mom and my sister had left. So this was later that night. And we asked her, like, do you think it's a umbilical cord accident? And she told us that she was 99% sure that that was the reason.
Really?
Yes. But then we went back. So then we thought, okay, she thinks it's a cord accident. We're not going to do an autopsy because they've told us that most people don't, that it's expensive, that insurance doesn't cover it really, and that, we think it's a cord accident. So, and the doctor who delivered her was like, she looks perfect. If it was me, I probably wouldn't do an autopsy. So it was just like, okay. Well, then when I went back for my 2-week appointment with my doctor, she mentioned it not being a cord accident again. And so again, it was like, okay, so is it a cord accident or is it not? And then when we went back for my 4-week appointment, I actually saw a different doctor. And so Dustin asked his opinion, and he was like, well, I wasn't, there, but what I've read from the notes and what I know from what, Dr. Blank has told me, it was a loose nuchal cord, and it most likely was not an umbilical cord accident. It wasn't like wrapped multiple times. It was wrapped once. It was loose. And so then Dustin was like, well, then why would she have said that? And he was like, well, I haven't talked to her about it, but my guess is that she was probably trying to give you some comfort in this situation when there like is no answers.
Yeah.
So we don't have any conclusive results. I do think that it wasn't a cord accident just based on the fact that I have met people whose deaths have been ruled a cord accident, and they say that their children had like marks from the cord being tight on their
Oh.
body.
Mm-hmm.
And she did not have any of those. There was no like tight mark around her neck or anything.
Mm.
It wasn't even like red from where the cord was.
Yeah.
There were like no knots in it. So it seems like there's usually indentations on the baby, and Margaret didn't have any of those.
Mm-hmm.
My placenta and everything was fine. We had done genetic testing at 10 weeks, and everything showed up normal. So when they offered, again, before I had even delivered her, one of the things was like, we can send her over to another hospital to do more genetic testing that's like recommended by an MFM. And so at the time it was like, okay, sure. And then by the time she was delivered, I asked the doctor who delivered her whether we should do that or not. And she said that she was under the impression that the genetic testing that she would do at the hospital was pretty much the genetic testing we already had.
That you already did. Okay.
So we didn't send her there, because then they said they'd send her in an ambulance. And then I was just thinking, like, I don't want to send her away when I'm here. And had I
Yeah.
have asked, I'm sure they probably would have sent her after we had left. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I was thinking it was like an immediate thing. Well, I've since seen like an MFM, a maternal fetal specialist, and he said that the genetic testing I did tested for, say, like 10 things. And the one that they would have done on Margaret would have tested for like 10,000 things.
Oh, okay.
So we really should have also sent her for that. But since then, I have had genetic genotype testing done on me, or karyotype testing,
Mm-hmm.
and everything came back normal. So
Okay.
Dustin is now the next step to see, but chances are probably pretty likely that it's just one of the unexplainable stillbirths. And that seems to be from the people I know that are OBGYNs. When it is like late term pregnancy like mine, that tends to be fairly common.
Yeah.
Is that it just happens and there's no reason.
There's no reason. Yeah.
And I mean, if we had a reason, I don't honestly know if that would be any better. You know, I mean,
Right.
she's still gone.
Yeah.
And then I think I would just be, you know, I don't know, maybe blame myself more, or, you know, I don't know how.
Yeah.
But so no, we have no conclusive results.
Emily, thank you very much for sharing this. I know it was not easy, but it was fun to get to know you and your family, and also Margaret. Is there anything else you want to tell us about Margaret? Anything that you want to remember?
Oh, everything. I mean, she was just so beautiful. She had all her 10 fingers and all her 10 toes, and counted. And she had just such soft skin and dark hair that looked like it'd be curly, and I have curly hair, so that really made me happy. And we miss her so much, and I just love her to the moon and back. And I just hate that this happened to her and to us and to everyone else who's experienced it.
Yeah. Well, once again, Emily, thank you so much. This was wonderful, and I appreciate you sharing Margaret with us.
Yes, thank you so much for letting me share her.
Many thanks again to Emily for sharing her story of Margaret, how beautiful that was, and we're so grateful for her time today. Head on over to our website, stillapartofus.com, where you can find the show notes, including a full transcript of this interview and any resources that were mentioned, where you can sign up for our short and helpful email newsletter, where you can learn how you can become a patron and support the work it takes to produce this show for just a few dollars a month, and lastly, where you can find out how to get in touch with us if you want to share your child's story on the show. The show was produced and edited by Winter and Lee Red. Thanks to Josh Woodward for letting us use his song, Flickering Flame. You can find him at joshwoodward.com. Lastly, subscribe to this podcast and share it with a friend that might need it, and tell them to subscribe. Why? Because people need to know that even though our babies are no longer with us, they're still a part of us.
Knowledge is like underwear. It is useful to have it, but not necessary to show it off. Bill Murray.